everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin, and for today's video we're going to be talking about my August wrap-up. So as I mentioned in my September TBR, I did not have a great reading month in the month of August, and I've talked about this a lot so I won't go into too much detail, but I was in a really bad headspace this month, and I also went on a trip across the country, and just like a bunch of things added up and I wasn't really in the mood to read, so I didn't read a ton. But between me filming that video and now when I'm filming this one, I have since been able to finish 3 more books. Almost all of the books that I read this month were really short. I read 1 full-length novel, I read 2 poetry collections, and 3 graphic novels. So all of the books that I read were really short, but I enjoyed most of them. So quality-wise, I did have a really great reading month, which is good considering everything else that's going on. I guess we'll just get started. We'll go in chronological order like I normally do, and I will give you all of my thoughts on everything that I read. I think it goes without saying that not many of the books that I read were on my TBR. I don't know, I typically have a really hard time sticking to my TBR, but like add everything else that went on in, it was not happening. So the first book that I finished this month was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which so many of you guys, ever since like I've put it in a video, have been commenting and waiting to hear my thoughts on. So now I've completed it, we can talk about it. I gave this a 4.25 out of 5 stars. I finished it August 1st, so it's been some time. A lot of things have transpired. I barely remember this, so I have to really heavily rely on my notes for this. Most people say that the audiobook like really adds an extra like layer and it makes the experience so much better, and I would definitely agree with that opinion. I really liked it. I don't know, it just made me feel a little bit more connected to everything that was going on. And when I started this book a really long time ago when it first came out, I was like really not invested in anything that was going on by reading it physically. So I'm glad that I read or listened to the audiobook. I feel like that really helped my experience and definitely like changed my opinion had I read this physically. So if you are able to, I would definitely recommend the audiobook just like everyone else. But yeah, I would definitely say that the audiobook is worth giving a try at the very least. Everyone has like their own narrator, and so sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, but you learn pretty quickly who's talking about who and who, like what their voices are and stuff like that. So that was really nice. Something that I wrote down was that Daisy has some really incredible quotes and just like perspectives and different things like that. So I really enjoyed Daisy as a main character because nobody in this book is perfect by any means, but Daisy was definitely a really interesting main character to hear from. I don't think though that she was my favorite character in the whole book. I don't remember who my favorite character was, but it definitely wasn't Daisy. I don't remember why, but I remember thinking like, I don't know. I feel like while she was definitely interesting and had a unique perspective, I did find her slightly off-putting at times. But that's not to say that she's a bad character, and that could just be like that is my personal opinion, but I don't think that everybody shares that opinion. This story is definitely really compelling, and due to all of the hype, I didn't think I was going to like it. I almost didn't want to. I just felt like this was not going to be a story that I was going to enjoy, especially because like it's a band and it's a series of interviews. Like that's not something that I ever typically read from, and it's not something that I was necessarily excited to read either. I just wanted to read it to understand what everybody else was talking about and just kind of see their point of view. But I did actually really enjoy it, which coming from someone who said that they didn't want to, I feel like is, you know, a good note to make. And I also really think that the the addition of the music in the book was really interesting, because just like everyone else, the same thing with Evelyn Hugo, where you finish it and you want to watch all her movies. After this, I just wanted to listen to all of their music, and it's not real, and that has been a struggle to cope with, because I think it would be really interesting to like hear different performances that they referenced and see like, oh, like I understand what they're talking about in this person's voice and this part of the song. Like, I just think that that would be so interesting to analyze, and the fact that it's not real is a little bit heartbreaking, but I still, like I've said a million times, really enjoyed it. The next note that I wrote down was Taylor Jenkins Reid has a real talent for creating characters and circumstances that feel so tangible, which I definitely agree with. Like, these characters don't make the like right decision 100% of the time, or like what like society would expect them to choose, which I feel like is very authentic. So they feel like real celebrities almost, because they are making mistakes that real people will make, have made, continue to make in society. And not even just like celebrities make those choices, everyone makes those choices. And so I think that that is going to be really appealing, but also really relatable for like a wide array of people. Like, no matter who you are, you may have gone through something that has been talked about in this book, because each character has their own story, and even the siblings in this book, like, they're each very distinct. And I just found that, like, I feel like this book will appeal to a lot of people because of that, because at least one of these characters you can relate to something that they've been through, which I thought was really cool. But the part that I was kind of laughing at is I wrote down, I just want to listen to Aurora, which is one of the albums that they've written in this book. Then I kind of have an unpopular opinion. There was one point where I was listening to it and I was like, yes, this is a 5-star read. I get it. Like, I just feel as connected as everyone else. But then towards the end, I kind of got bored and it definitely fell flat for me. And I just feel like the ending could have been more devastating. I like really dark, sad books, clearly. This was my, like, opinion with Evelyn Hugo too. Like, the ending could have been more heartbreaking. And, like, for example, spoiler warning, this doesn't happen, so if you don't want to know anything, then skip. But, like, I feel like Daisy could have died or something like that, and it would have made it more, like, tragic, and I was just underwhelmed by it. I don't know. I'm really dark. I'm just so morbid. I feel bad saying stuff like that, because it was like, Erin, this is still really sad, but I'm like, there could have been more. So yeah, this one I've talked for way too long about, but 4.25 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it. Not as much as the rest of BookTube, but if you've been on the fence about it, I would recommend it. It's not going to be for everybody, but I do feel like everybody, or almost everybody, can find something to relate to in here. So maybe the story itself isn't, but you could connect to something in here. And if that's something that will push you to read it, then it holds true and I would recommend you read it. So the next book that I read was Katie Wismer's The Sweetest Kind of Poison. I read this on ebook, so I don't have it physically, but I do want to buy the physical copy. This is a poetry collection that tells a story, which I found really interesting, because a lot of poetry collections do try to tell a story, but this one was genuinely like a story, and that was really cool. So this one is about heartbreak and like a toxic, abusive relationship, falling in love, getting your heart broken, and then trying to realize, like, this was bad for me. It's a good thing that I am not in this situation anymore, and growing from all of those experiences. And I found it really interesting. It, I would say, is one of my favorite poetry collections. It's hard because I still love her, so I need to reread both of them and be like, which one do I love more? But it might be my favorite. It was the first poetry collection to ever make me cry, and there were just some things that I really connected with. I also found it really interesting because I would say that the writing style in this is similar to the way that I write, which I found really, really cool to read. Like, I was reading some of them and seeing like, oh, like I could see myself writing something very similar to this, or at least using this style, and that was really cool. I'm trying to see if I have any other notes written on it. Another thing is most poetry collections end with a hopeful ending so that you can go away kind of like feeling good, and I don't generally like those because, as we know, I like dark, sad, morbid endings, but I found that I really enjoyed the hopeful ones in this because it wasn't like, I feel like with other poetry collections it's like, okay, you're better now, move on, but this one was like, you can be better even if you're not yet, and so that was something that I really, really liked. As I said, this was the first poetry collection to make me cry, and it happened more than once. I read this in like 20 minutes sitting at the airport, and I just couldn't stop reading it. I was going to save it for my flight, but I obviously didn't do that. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I think that might go without saying though. And I cannot wait to get my hands on a physical copy, and I genuinely hope that maybe she writes more poetry in the future because I think she's really, really good at it. Next one that I read was Fence Volume 3 by C.S. Bacat. This is, I think, the final installation, which makes me really, really sad, but I'm genuinely not sure. I hope it's not because I want more of these graphic novels. About an all-boys school, and this kid is trying out for the fencing team, and he's up against a bunch of other kids who are even more talented or just as talented as he is, and so it's like high stakes, and the only way that he can continue to go to this school is if he makes the fencing team, and so there's a lot on the line for him. I absolutely adored this graphic novel. The art style is impeccable, but also the story and the relationships are incredible. Something that I loved about this graphic novel, in particular this installation, is that we get to see a lot more of other characters' backgrounds, and so a lot of depth is added to all of those characters. We get to know them a lot better, which is something that I felt was lacking in all of the other the other two graphic novels in this series, so that definitely boosted my rating for this. This graphic novel series is also just so incredibly wholesome and sweet, and I want more, but also, like the ending, I'm so proud of all of my children. You guys crushed it. And then just another like added bonus is that I learned so much about fencing when I read these graphic novels, and I think it's so fun and entertaining, so I would highly recommend this. I also gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It was so freaking good, and if you haven't picked up this series, I think my sister's home. As I was saying, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't picked it up, it is one of the most wholesome graphic novel series I have ever read, and it is so freaking cute, and I would highly recommend it. I think this next book was my favorite book of the whole month. I loved it so much. The next book that I read this month, I picked up on a whim, and I wasn't sure I was even going to like it, but I loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It's one of my favorite books of the year, and it is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. This is about these two friends, Deja, I'm not sure how you pronounce her name, and Josie, and they are seasonal best friends because they work together at this pumpkin patch every September to October, but they don't ever really hang out much outside of work, and so it's their senior year. It's the last year before they go off to college that they'll even get to hang out with each other, and this takes place on Halloween. It's their last night working together, and they are going on this adventure to find Josie's like crush that he's had for many, many years, and you just see their friendship and all of their banter and all of the autumn like vibe. It's just so incredible. I loved it so freaking much. The art style is incredible, so I loved that as well, but like I just couldn't stop reading this. I picked it up on a whim and read 50 pages in Barnes & Noble, and I was like, okay, I have to take it home with me. It's just too good not to. The relationship between Josie and Deja, I'm just gonna say Deja, I think it's Deja. The relationship between them reminded me so much of my best friend, Lindsay, and the way that we talk to each other, and I loved it even more for that. and I related to Josie's shyness so much. It was everything. This book made me laugh out loud and smile and just made me happy to read in a way that I haven't been in a really long time. And so I'm definitely going to be picking this up so much during the fall just because I love it so much and I want to read it all the time. I just want to read it all the time. So I'm definitely gonna like try and hold off and read it on Halloween because I think that would be just really, really special and fun. So catch this in my October wrap up too, but this was just, it was everything. It was everything. And I want more, even though it's not, like, I know it's supposed to be a standalone, but like I want more. So, oh, I think I said it was a 5 out of 5 stars, easy all day, but I'm not sure. The next one is one that I picked up because I was watching Brittany the Bibliophile's book haul and she had picked it up and I already owned it and I had already read it, but she said that it was darker than she was expecting and I didn't remember it being that dark, so I wanted to reread it again and I hadn't annotated it the first time, and so I was going to annotate it this time, which I ended up doing, and it was The Princess Saves Herself. It was The Princess Saves Herself in this one by Amanda Lovelace. This is a poetry collection that deals with a lot of heavy topics like sexual assault and abuse and death, and there's one about suicide in there as well, and just a lot of things. But my opinion still holds true. I didn't really think it was that dark. As we know, dark for me has to be really, really dark, because this was still pretty like light to me, even though it did deal with really heavy topics. I didn't think it was like that dark. I wasn't taken aback and like, whoa, this is almost off-putting. I just thought, okay, like, I don't know what that says about me. I found while reading this that I'm not a huge fan of the writing style, which sucks, and is also really, really interesting because I read The Mermaid's Voice Returns in this one by Amanda Lovelace earlier this year and I loved it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was one of my favorite collections of poetry that I've ever read, and then I've read a lot of other poetry this year, so like that doesn't necessarily hold true, but it's definitely my favorite in this poetry collection series. But I didn't really like most of the poems in this one. Instead of like enjoying the poems, I enjoyed the ideas and the thoughts behind the poems, but I didn't enjoy the poems themselves. But I also really, really liked the like title at the end of the poems more than I tended to like the actual poems itself, which I found really, really interesting and bizarre. So I think that Amanda Lovelace is really good with like one-liners, but when it comes to like putting a poem together, I wasn't a huge fan. I don't know why. So as you can see, I tabbed it up, and there are a decent amount of tabs in here, not that many for it being like 200 poems. But these are the ones where I just liked the ideas behind them. There were only like 2 or 3 that I connected with and really resonated with me, which really sucks because that's what I want when I'm reading a poetry collection. But all of the ones that I marked were the ones that I was like, oh, this is like really thought-provoking. And it wasn't like, oh, this is something that I connect with, which is what I want when I'm reading poetry. So that was unfortunate. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I don't think it's horrible. It's just not for me. But now I am really intrigued to pick up The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one by Amanda Lovelace and see what my thoughts are on that and give like a more thorough review for it. And then the last one was another reread, but it was one that did not disappoint, and that is The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. This got better the second time somehow. I knew everything that happened, but I loved it even more. I think the first time just wanted to like read it really quickly, and so I did. I read it in 30 minutes, and it still didn't take me long. I probably read it in like 35 minutes this time, just because I was appreciating the art style and wanted to take my time with it, so I did by adding 5 minutes. But I loved this. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars the first time I read it. I gave it a 4.75 out of 5. This is still one, all of the thoughts that I had before still hold true, except I connected with it more this time. There is a lot of diversity in this, and for that it's definitely one that I want to read when I have kids, or read with my kids when I have them, because I feel like there's a lot of like subliminal healthy messages in it that I think would be good to teach them. And like I said, it's just naturally really diverse, which I think is important and really cool. It's just the thing that everybody says is it's so wholesome, and it really is. It doesn't get any more wholesome than this, and I love it. It made me smile and feel really warm and happy inside, which, as you guys know, that's something that I have not been feeling very much. So that made me obviously feel really good. I love just how genuine this book feels, and I can't say enough good things about it. It's the absolute cutest thing in the world. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it, and I cannot wait for the sequel to come out in September. It's September 1st, so 16 days from now the sequel will be published, and I am so excited for it. I'm so excited. I hope that there are more just besides like the sequel coming out, because I want to learn more about tea dragons and just the world and see how relationships develop in the book. It's everything, and I want more just in the world. It's so cute. These are all of the books that I read in the month of August. I didn't have a great quantity-wise. I mean, it wasn't horrible. It could have been way worse. But August as a whole in the month was not the best month for me, but reading-wise, I did have a really good time, and I just enjoyed my time reading, which is something that I haven't done in a really long time, and so that was really special. So I hope that you guys had an amazing month reading and otherwise. I hope that you're doing well. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next one. Bye guys!